When performing business continuity planning and a business impact analysis, there's a couple different ways to assess risks to the organization. One of those is using a quantitative risk assessment that makes calculations based on a dollar amount and the value of assets within the organization to determine the potential risk and the potential impact to the organization if those assets are rendered inoperable. The quantitative risk assessment uses hard numbers as opposed to a qualitative risk assessment, which would use general risk statements like this is a high impact or medium impact system. Quantitative risk assessments say this system is worth X amount of dollars and it would cost the organization this amount of money if this is taken offline. They're very time consuming to calculate in most instances, but they're extremely accurate if done correctly. When performing a quantitative risk assessment, you need to calculate the asset's value, and this could be the cost of the asset, including depreciation, if the asset's old, or the cost, the value the asset brings to the organization. This also can be, if it's an asset that generates revenue, how much revenue is generated over a unit of time, like per day or per hour by that asset. So if you're talking about a company that offers streaming services, you can calculate based on the amount of revenue taken in and the value or the importance of that asset, a general idea of how much that asset is making the organization every day or every hour. If it's something like a television, it can be pretty easy to just determine, okay, this television costs us $1,000, that's in the break room. If it breaks, we can expect a loss of $1,000. Single loss expectancy is when you calculate the loss of a single occurrence or the impact of a single occurrence, a single outage. So in our TV example, TV in the break room maybe costs $800. If it breaks or someone spills coffee on it or something, goes offline, that cost the organization would be $800. Something a little more pertinent to cloud security would be maybe a web server. A web server generates or hosts an online store for a business that maybe it's a clothing business, and that online store generates maybe $180,000 per hour. So if the web server is taken offline, then that will cost the organization $180,000 per hour. Now, an organization that's making $180,000 per hour will probably have some form of redundancy and server clustering so that the one web server would not cause an outage like this. But if you identified a web server generating $180,000 per hour that had no form of redundancy in place, that'd probably be a good place for your organization to start in addressing that risk of that loss of revenue. And of course, this would include the amount of time needed and the resources required from a personnel standpoint to get the server back online. And if the server would need to be replaced, that's also a cost associated with that. So it would take the manpower cost into account as well, and the cost of the equipment if any equipment needs to be replaced. That's all included in the single loss expectancy. The annual rate of occurrence, very easy to calculate. You take over a year how many times an outage is expected or has occurred if you have historic data. If it occurs once per year, your ARO is 1. If it occurs twice in a year, it's 2. If it occurs once every 4 years, it's 0.25. Very simple to calculate, and it's just the number of times an event occurs per year. Then you have your annual loss expectancy, or ALE. This is calculated by multiplying the SLE and the ARO. So you have your SLE, which is a dollar amount, and your ARO, which is a number or a decimal fraction, and then you just times those together and you get your ALE. Very simple to calculate, and this number represents the average losses expected by an organization in when threats exploit a vulnerability. So if you have a loss, and then how many times that loss occurs per year. So think about it this way: if you have an outage that costs you costs the organization $10,000 every time a server goes offline, and that server is expected to go offline twice a year, Annually, you're expected to lose $20,000.